One of my original concepts on my saw channel was Farmer Jones. You know, those fixes which you are not necessarily proud of, but they get the things done. And I did my first clone saws that way. Well, you may or may not have seen bits and pieces of the last series of clips on this particular device right here. This is my old tedder, and the shaft that spins on, and that slides onto, it's a stub a few inches long. I guess it's about 8-10 inches long. Well, it broke right up here, and I went to the local machine shop and they really couldn't do anything for me. More they didn't want to than anything else, but what they did do is drill a hole. They drilled a hole in that plate, which is about 1.25 inches oversized. So what I did was I took a piece of bar stock and turned it down so it was about a 3/1000 or 4/1000 interference fit with that hole, and drove it in. And then we reassembled this whole thing and realized that we were off by one spline, and in order to get it timed properly, it was a real problem to disassemble all that. So on this one here, since that axle had already come off pretty easy, you can see where I beat on it with a hammer first time. Well, now it was off, and I was able to slide that down, rotate this basket right here, because there's a gear right on top, and I just sort of rotated it and set it back up. So now it's timed with these three right here. But that one was horribly out of time. And as you can tell how hard it was to hammer on that, needless to say, that one right there was rusted on too, won't come off. Took the roll pins off and it wouldn't come out. So I won't be able to drop that down and rotate it so its gears can come back up in time properly. So plan B, Farmer Jones, I'm just going to drill a bunch of holes and reset the tines and see if I can make this thing run. Not proud of it, but I need to get the hay done. Well, one of the games I like to play is trying to make as long a train as I can, right? Gonna have to excuse the layout being in construction, just because it's being modified. I think we're gonna do something completely different with the raised area and the mountain. We had to change the way the mountain is because the long trains are hitting the wall. So I had to move the track, shorten that one section there. But the mountain is a modular thing, so it comes off and we're able to work underneath it to get that clearance. So that's what's going on with the layout. Haven't put it back together yet because we're not quite sure what we're going to do with the upper layer. But anyway, back to the subject at hand. I've got these two Lionel MPC era GP9's, and the game I would like to play is adding traction to pull a longer train. Now here's the dilemmas. First, since I have elevation changes, what'll happen is I'll run out of traction if I just use one of these locomotives that doesn't have magnet traction. So I want to put two sometimes so I can pull it up the hill. Now the second thing is, as a line of cars starts going up that hill around that corner where the weight is down the track, as I start pulling along the line there, those cars will fold right in unless I weight them. Now, of course, if I start putting weight on them, then I have to have more tractive effort. So one of the solutions is, as in a railroad, is start scattering the locomotives through the train. So what you're effectively doing is really making short trains and just, tagging one onto the other. That's what a DPU looks like on a model, railroad. But in order to do that, they have to run reasonably close at the same basic voltages. So for example, if you got one that starts at, say, 4 volts, but the other one doesn't get moving until 8, well, you have a chance of breaking up your train as that first one starts to pull, but the other one anchors a spot and it won't do it. Now, if you put it up front, the one in the back will try to jam the train into it, and you can, it'll fold up on itself. If you have it in the back, on a corner, it'll just pull the cars off the track. So we're going to start that process of trying to find a couple of locomotives that work well together, and then we'll start building a long train. Now, I was hoping that the 2 MPC era GP9's would work well together, but they don't. Let's see what happens. I don't really have my transformer set up just yet the way I like, but I do have this little voltmeter. Just because it has so-called voltage ratings on the gauge doesn't mean that's what's going through the track. So let's start with, say, 5 volts. Well, it jumps right to 8. Well, that one's moving. That one over there is not moving much. All right, let's go to 10 volts. That's better. Okay, what I did see as it was going on the track was every once in a while that one would pull away, then this one would catch up. So really the only issue they have is on startup, where my Erie Lackawanna Lionel will start with lower voltage, the GP9, than the GP7. Let's see what happens for sure here. See how that is? So let's put some very light cars in between those and see what happens. Now, to jump ahead, I would put the slower locomotive up front, and I'd put the little faster one back here, because if I hang a bunch of cars off the back, it'll slow this one down and help match it up. I don't know if that makes any sense. But let's see what happens if we do this. Let's see if the faster locomotive, or the one that starts with less voltage, is far enough off or far enough out of sync that actually derails the cars. So let's go to 10 volts. Okay, well that worked out pretty good. So looks like they're close enough that I can actually start putting some cars to the back. I might be able to add another car between them. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, let me see what I have, and I'll start adding some cars and see how long we can make this train before it either runs out of traction or it starts pulling cars off the track. So I added 2 box cars. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cars between the 2 locomotives and 2 hoppers. Let's see if that works. Let's just jump right to 10 volts. All right, we had to jump 12 volts. So that's 10 cars. Let's see if we can go to, say, 15 cars. All right, I added 5 more cars. I'm going to go right to like 12 volts. All right, I'm going to add some more cars. I'm thinking 5 more would be a little much unless I make them lightweight. So I'm going to mix some more hoppers with some lighter cars. Now when you start getting into these longer trains, one of the things you need to do is look at the couplers and see if they line up well. Because remember, as they go up and down the track, you know, there'll be little humps here and there. If they're not aligned pretty well, when they go over a change in angle, it'll either couple or uncouple them. You'll engage them more or less. See, like right here, we have a little bit of a hump, and you can see that happening. So I went through and tried to line them up as best I can, and then we'll give it another try. I can tell you by pushing this set of cars, it's what, 12 cars? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. As I am pushing the limits. I can tell that I'm pushing the limits. That's a lot of load right there. Now, of course, there's one guy who does long trains, and his cars are better maintained than mine, so they roll better. So let's give this another shot. Let's see how this... I changed out the car that's up against the locomotive. Let's see how the hook matches up to the locomotive hook. It seems like it's pretty good. Give it another shot. May have just a couple cars too many. But I'm going somewhere with this. You know? We're going to build it up and then we're going to try something, kind of make a point. So, going to jump right to 15 volts. So we got, what, 20 cars going here, and it seems like it's relatively stable. And a couple of points I want to make is when I checked out the two engines. I put the one that responded a little bit faster at the back, and then I just loaded it up. So really both those locomotives are now under load. That was not going to push the one in front because there's so much load behind it. It's going to have a hard enough time pulling that. So the one in the front is probably helping just a little bit. The one in the middle, and it's loaded up pretty heavy, taking the rest of the train. So those two locomotives pulled 20 cars in that configuration. What do you think would happen if I put that one up front, head-end power? Do you think it would pull those 20 cars? How many corners do you think it'll take before that thing folds right up? I think we're going to find out. All right, so what I did was I took my DPU and I put it right in back of the first locomotive, so I have two up front instead of having distributed power throughout the train. Let's see if we can make this go around the track. And the question I'm going to have is, what's going to fail? Is a coupler going to fail first, or is the old pull the string straight scenario going to take some of those cars and pull them right off the curbs? Now, second part of this is how much control I have over the locomotive is going to make a big part of the success or failure in this. So let's just creep into the voltage. Yep, folded up in that corner right there. So let's just see what the failure was. And my guess is the resistance of the train took those light cars and pulled them right to the inside of the track. See that? So that begs the question. How would you solve that problem if you want to have all head-end power? With this many cars, I'm not sure you can. But one thing I can tell you is by having the lightweight cars right there, that would be like having empty cars on a real train right behind the head-end power, pulling a whole bunch of loaded cars or heavier cars. So you'd want the loaded cars up front, would be my guess, and the empties in the back, or the lightweights in the back. So I'm not sure I can make this work, but I'm going to give it one try. I'm going to try to see if by moving the box cars behind the hoppers that I have a better chance of getting that train started. I'll put a little bit of weight in the hoppers too. All right. Tried reconfiguring the train, putting a little weight, moving the hoppers to the front, box cars to the back. Still have the same 20 cars. And let's see if we can make this one go around. See, I don't think we can, but what this will demonstrate is the kind of failures you're going to have when you start getting too long a train. We know we've got enough traction to pull it, right? They pulled the 20 cars quite nicely when I had the one as a DPU. But see if we can creep into this. Oh, we had a coupler failure. All right. It probably pulled off. Yeah, it did pull it off the curve. I'm not sure we're going to be able to pull 20 cars with just straight head-end power. I'm going to try one more thing after we get the train put back together. Now you have to be impressed with those two things. MPC era Lionels teamed up to pull a fairly heavy 20-car train. If I could clap and hold the camera at the same time, it's a good job, especially for the money. All right, let's see what we get with this thing right here. And that's a K-line Trainmaster with 2 can motors, flywheels and all. And I just finished successfully pulling this 20-car train around my layout, hills and all, with a pair of Lionel MPC era locomotives. Yep, immediately that popped right off the track. Got one little jerk just like that. Now let me try again. Now, part of the reason I was successful with those Lionels was because of the control I had at the low voltage settings to creep into power. I don't know why it's stopping. Huh. No idea why it does that. Well, as a result of the herky-jerky starts and stops, it broke the train. And how about the MTH, the old Proto 1 2-can motor locomotive? Let's see if it can handle it. Nice smooth takeoff. Well, I guess horsepower eventually won. I gave it a little bit too much throttle because I had one hand on the transformer and one hand on the camera. But the MTH could do it because I had the control right until I gave it too much gas. But, so what's the takeaway from all this? What's the takeaway? The takeaway is that with a DPU in the middle of the train, it's infinitely easier to manage those extra cars than if I didn't have one. Even the more modern locomotives with all kinds of control, unless you really finesse it, it's hard to get that heavy a train around a track with tight corners and elevation change. That's the takeaway. The second takeaway is those old Lionel MPCs did a pretty good job, didn't they, for what they are? You know? Third takeaway, that poor train master, I think, is just too long for this short, tight radius track. But anyway, that was fun. Let me see if I can get the train together and maybe give that locomotive a little bit of assistance. Okay, I put the train back together. We had one of the cars actually fall into the river there. Now think about this. You got the one MTH, 20 cars, and more than half of them are down a hill. So now he has to start that effectively on a hill and not fold those cars in on that curve. That's going to take a little finesse. Let's see if we can do it. And then I think we're going to give this guy a little bit of help. He's working too hard. That's impressive.